great. We're going to go ahead and get started, try to keep the trains on time. I am really excited about this session. My name is Carmen Logue, and I'm a product manager, and one of the products that I work with is Adaptive Analytics, which we announced and then launched about 2 years ago. And in this session, we're actually not going to be talking much about the product. We're going to be talking about 2 use cases and 2 ways that customers are using Adaptive Analytics. And I'm joined, I'm sitting because we gave the good mics to Joe and Jamie so they can talk. And they're going to take us through those 2 use cases. But before we jump into the use cases, let me just remind you a little bit about what Adaptive Analytics is. It's a product offer from InterSystems that is an add-on to InterSystems IRIS or InterSystems IRIS for Health. And it really acts as, I made a little picture here of a layer on top of IRIS or IRIS for Health. And it provides kind of this idea of a common language, so a set of metrics and things that can be shared across the enterprise. So if you have somebody in accounting who's using Excel, they're going to see the same set of metrics that somebody in marketing who's using Tableau is going to see. So it really provides kind of that idea of, bring your own BI tool. So if you have internal expertise in a variety of tools, and everybody has Excel, right, it seems. So if you've got Excel plus other things, it allows you to kind of use the tool of choice across the enterprise and have that common semantic layer. And then the other thing which you'll see in one of these use cases is it also provides the ability to kind of build aggregated values based on the kinds of queries and the questions that are coming in. So we're going to store all of that data in IRIS. So the source data is in IRIS, the aggregated data is in IRIS, and so when the person using Excel asks a question, if somebody using Tableau asks the same question 2 hours later, they're going to get the benefit of those aggregated values in that case. So yeah, I think you'll see in these 2 use cases how that plays out as a benefit. So with that, I will introduce Jamie, who's going to take us through our first use case.
Thank you very much, Carmen. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So, stop me if you've heard this one before. It's 2015. A major medical device manufacturing company collects tons of data. They need to make it useful and actionable for their customer. That was an old joke. How about a new joke? It's 2023. A major medical device manufacturing company needs to make their data useful and actionable for their customer. Okay, not a great joke, but it's still true. Okay. And we were approached, okay, by just such, there we go.
We're going the wrong direction. Yep.
Oh, okay. Sorry. There we go. And we were approached by just such a company. And they were already collecting this data. And they were already starting down their own path trying to use this data. In fact, what they actually had was, thank you, they have a drug ordering system that happens to be built already on Cache with plans to move to IRIS. They were dumping all of that into a data lake, 3 years worth of it, in fact, to be exact. And they had a big team. They had to normalize all this data. They had to clean all of this data, all the standard things that you have to do. And they had to actually pull manual reports monthly for the customers. Okay. So they showed up and they sat there and said, can we make this better? Okay, I mean, we have to do all of this work. Can we do something to make this better? So we ended up talking to them and we started coming up with a few questions, on how we might build the first use case around this. One of the things you might notice about some of these questions is I said a drug ordering system, and it might be a little hard to answer in all of these questions from just that data. Okay. After exploring this topic for a bit, we proposed using IRIS Advanced Server coupled with Adaptive Analytics to actually solve this problem for them. part of the reason why is the data set that they have. It made it very useful for this. One of the things I have to stress, adaptive analytics is not for real-time reporting. Does not work that way. Okay? It is specifically for older data. Hopefully older data that doesn't change much. But data that you know that's gone by, their original data set was over a week old. And the data set they would be adding later to really provide even more data, more value, was 24 hours old. Aside from that, I just mentioned we'll be combining two models. The other model, which they happen to have infusion pumps, and we'll be getting the data from those infusion pumps. Well, two separate models. By using the semantic layer that Carmen had already mentioned, we can combine those models right away. We don't really have to go into IRIS and rebuild the entire models and then store the data that way. We can use the semantic layer to mesh them together. And lastly, these are big tables. You know, hundreds of millions of rows, cross-reference to hundreds of millions of rows. They make large aggregates. And they had an entire team that was responsible for maintaining these aggregates and making sure that they were useful for this. Okay, so what's the architecture that we basically came up with? They already had the data lake data. We might as well just borrow that, and we did. And that fed into IRIS Advanced Server. It's sitting in their cloud tenant, and we installed that, and we installed a server of adaptive analytics. They're not huge. They're 4 cores, 32. 4 cores double threaded to 8 cores, 32 gigs of RAM on both the advanced server and both the adaptive analytics. So to start with, it was just the ordering system. That, of course, gave value. We added the second to it. It gives even more value for the customer. So, as we stated earlier, and Carmen also stated this, now that customer, so the major manufacturing device company makes this available to their customer. Their customer can now run those monthly reports by themselves. They don't have to call up to them. In fact, if they come up with a new idea, a new way to look at the data, they can do it themselves. They don't need to call back to that company to begin again, and they can take care of that. And they can run whatever BI tool that they wish against it. Okay, so effectively, bring your own query against the data. Okay, so where did that lead? That led to this vision for this company. Create new digital services to provide their customers with direct access to use the data, to analyze data, collected across their, across all of their data sets. You might be asking yourself the following question. I had already mentioned that when they were trying to do their own data lake, they had a big team. Well, how big was the team that did this project? Okay, myself. I had one developer, okay, that I mentored, okay, using about 80% of their time. By the way, I never touched a keyboard. I was not allowed to. They don't trust me. It's okay. But 80% of that person's time, one data scientist, 50% of that person's time, and we were able to put this solution together. Now, of course, I already said this leveraged adaptive analytics, created those aggregates. They originally were doing this with Tableau, and this matters a lot, and I'll explain in a second. It matters because of what Carmen explained. That data scientist was delighted to be able to set up the model. It took us a little while to show him how to do it, but once he was able to do it, he was able to set the model up himself completely. And he was delighted to see those aggregates build automatically against his queries. Okay, and that was great. Here's the problem. Okay. Their customer, okay, was not a Tableau house. Okay. Their customer, okay, uses PowerBI. So, in this case, shift gears, but only a little. The only little piece that we had to shift for these gears was we had to provide access to Power BI. That's it. The semantic layer was exactly the same. All the work that they already did was exactly the same. Didn't have to redo any of that part. So it just plain worked. Perfect. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to mention that this data ordering, the drug ordering system is multi-tenant. So one customer probably isn't allowed to see the other customer's data. Okay, more than likely. Once again, semantic layer easily comes to the rescue. Okay, we gave access at the adaptive analytics level to their customer. Their customer logs in, and as soon as their customer logs in, it queries against the data and locks off all the data they can't see. Done. Okay, even though it was multi-tenant, even though it had the same data down at the very bottom level at IRIS, what they saw was only their data, period. Okay. Now, where does this vision go? Okay, what are they hoping to do in the future? Well, they saw how easy it was to bring in the data sources already. Okay, why not bring in more? Why not just keep expanding this? Eventually create a data fabric that you can actually use. Okay, now, Joe will go into this a lot deeper. Yes, we can keep expanding the semantic layer. Maybe not the smartest choice to just keep making this huge layer. Okay, but each one of these semantic layers is really a cube. We can design those cubes specifically for the different cases of what they would like to mix and match and expose to their customer. So they can still tailor it specifically to their customers. Lastly, was this all sunshine and roses? Was it perfect? Did it go great? Okay, and we didn't have to worry at all after I taught him that and walk away? No. We learned some lessons. Okay. First of all, double, triple check your assumptions. We were told ahead of time that there were unique identifiers in these tables. They were not unique, and we found that out the hard way. And we had to go through and create unique identifiers and then reload all the data. Always fun. Second, actually I'm going to skip down to the bottom one, then come back. But second, modeling has a learning curve. This data scientist was used to using SQL. Wasn't used to how the models work, how the cubes work. Okay, so it threw him a little bit, and we had to teach him how to do it, how to expose those, how to have fact tables, how to be measures. Once again, you'll see that a bit on the demo that Joe's going to do. But he got it, and then he had exact access that he expected. And then lastly, okay, indexes still matter. At the end of the day, all of the semantic layer that you do actually run Power BI against, Tableau against, Excel against, they do boil down to queries that these aggregates are made off of. Okay? And the good news is, in adaptive analytics, you can usually see those queries. And you can go look at an IRIS Advanced Server, use all of its tools to optimize those queries. Okay? And such as query plans, such as indexes, and make that run really fast. Okay? When the aggregates themselves are built, you'll see that that runs even faster against them. But we can actually cut down the time the aggregates take to build too. So, I would never pass up doing indexes on large data. I also would suggest you hopefully do it on small data because small data might grow up and become large data. Okay. And with that, I'll pass it back to Carmen.
Yeah, actually, before you pass it back, let me just, because I want to call out one thing from this use case that I thought was pretty interesting. So the data scientist that Jamie mentioned that we were working with had been actually kind of handcrafting some of that aggregation himself. And so I think once he saw how the aggregates worked, I mean, you could almost see his eyes light up over the phone. It was pretty cool. So I don't know if you want to say any more about that.
Because the aggregates are built automatically, that he could actually watch them be created and see how they got used automatically. And Joe will show you specifically how you can see how they get called up when they're called, how much time they even save you. You'll see this. Okay, listed there. He was just astounded. It was because he didn't usually have to. He told another team how to build them. He didn't usually build them himself. And that's why he was so excited about it, because it automatically built for him. He didn't have to worry about it. Stuff like that. So, yeah. So that was a big part of it.
Yeah, great story. So that's our first use case. We're going to shift gears now and talk about our second use case, which is a financial services organization and a particular solution that InterSystems is building with that customer. So I'll turn it over to Joe for that.
All right, thanks, Carmen. Everybody hear me fine? Great. It's great to see some familiar faces and actually some new faces as well. So we talked about healthcare in the first use case today, kind of appropriate because the first keynote today was all about healthcare. We also saw how important interoperability was to healthcare. Well, that's not a unique story. Interoperability is also very important to financial services. So, next slide, please. What we're going to talk about today is a financial solution we're building at InterSystems called Business 360. And going to reference a particular customer, Harris Associates. And in tomorrow morning's keynote, Jay Umiltraj, the CTO of Harris Associates, will be part of the keynote, and we'll talk about this as well. So let's talk about the requirements. So while this sounds kind of simple, it actually can be quite complex. We want complete and accurate and current data across the entire enterprise. Who doesn't want complete and accurate and current data across the entire enterprise? That's the overall goal, but why do you do that? Not for the fun of doing it because you're technology people. You have important decisions to make. The more accurate, the more current, and the more data you have, the better ability you have to make those decisions. You also have regulatory requirements, especially in the financial services world. How do you meet those? So those are the key requirements, but we all have siloed data in many different applications. We have inconsistent data. This application says this, but this service says this. And it isn't just the fact that we have data in different places. If we could just get under control, that would be great. But guess what? The sources continue to grow. You get more and more sources. So how do you pull that all together? So the goal of Business 360 is to pull together all that financial information, leverage the ability of IRIS to integrate that information from multiple sources, do data translations, validation, create a canonical model for that data, for which what I'm going to focus on is, now that you have that data, what do you do with it? This morning in the healthcare presentation, you have all that data, what do you do with it? So I'll talk about the reporting and the self-service aspects of that. So again, better decision support. The better data you have, the better decisions you can make. Better compliance, regulatory compliance is really important. Risk management. Anybody have accounts with Silicon Valley Bank? One of their problems was bad risk management. So risk management is extremely important. And again, once you have better data, you also have the ability to innovate and provide more solutions to your customers. So let's talk a little bit about Business 360. If you want more detail on Business 360, tomorrow afternoon, Wei-Wen Lee is doing a presentation specifically on this. So I'll just briefly talk about it, but focus mostly on the right side, which is how to do the. So interoperability I mentioned was important. So this leverages all the interoperability capabilities that IRIS has. The ability to ingest data from applications, databases, services, maybe streaming data from Kafka. You have all these different sources. You have that, it's all governed by a security model. You have the ability to validate data, to translate data, to get data into canonical form. I'm going to focus on the right part of that, which is how do you do your reporting, and how do you do what's very important these days, the self-service analytics part. So we're going to shift to demo. Okay. And if I hit the right button, we get a screen. Okay, this is a tab. So let's look at the end first. This is a Tableau dashboard representing a particular model or a cube that was defined using IRIS Adaptive Analytics, and all the data is based on data that lives within IRIS. So here's one particular dashboard showing trade volume. In this case, we have a pie chart by region. We're also seeing historical information by product type. We have corporate equity, sovereigns, if I scroll down a bit more. This is one of the dashboards. We also have some tabular information by customer. Here we see for the 26th of January. Let's pick a different date. Let's go to maybe the next day. Let's do something on the 27th. And the dashboard will refresh and so forth. So a Tableau user who knows how to navigate Tableau, either something that was built for them or something they're building themselves, all they need to know is what model did I point to? Here on the left, we see the model presented in a very Tableau way, all the dimensions and measures that are available to you. In a moment, we'll see that same thing in Excel, because as Jamie mentioned, you have a consistent view of the data regardless of which of the UI tools that you use. So this is, and I don't want to go into a detailed Tableau demo, but once you have access to the data, you can do whatever you want to do with it in Tableau. Let's look behind the scenes for a bit. And I'm going to switch to going to IRIS Adaptive Analytics. Again, that's through our partnership with AtScale. So we have a whole series of cubes here. One of the things important when you're building these solutions is you are not going to have one cube that will solve everybody's problem. If you're in the SQL world, you can't have one view that will solve everybody's problem. You'll have different views for different use cases. Similarly, in the analytics world with cubes, you'll have different cubes for different use cases. Here you see a whole bunch of cubes that are part of Business 360. By the way, this is currently a live Business 360 demo environment set up via AWS. Thankfully, the network is working today, so I didn't have to use my screen image slides. So this is a live connection to an AWS environment running Business 360. So I'm going to pick one of the cubes here, Custom Trade Analysis. And here we see an overview of the cube. We see we have, in this particular cube, 6 measures, 41 dimensions. But let's go into the actual model itself. So I'm going to go into the cube design canvas. And here we see, in a very zoomed in way, we have a main fact table with lots of dimensions. Let me zoom in a bit here. So the foundation of this, what's called the fact table, the core table of the cube, is something called trade analysis. And if we look at this in a little bit of detail, we will see that what this actually is a table in IRIS called custom model view. So it's actually a virtual table. It's a view within the IRIS database. Queries to this end up happening as SQL queries that get sent from Adaptive Analytics to the core IRIS environment. Lots of other options you can have. You can actually have it based on queries as well. In this case, it's simply based on a table. And let's take one. And we have all our dimensions and measures defined. I'm not going into a lot of detail of how you would do that. You can also sample the data as well. I could come here and say, view our table data. And here we can see a sampling of the data that I'm pointing to, network permitting. There we go. So you're creating this, and again, the key is, what model do you need to solve the particular use case that you want to do? That will dictate what dimensions you have and what measures you have. What you don't want to do is, let me find the perfect cube that will solve everybody's problem, put 85 dimensions and 102 measures, and give it to a user and say, good luck. You want to create different cubes for different use cases. So this is the model that was designed here, a consistent view. All your calculations, all your formulas are here. So whether you're using it in Excel or Tableau, or even 2 different Excel spreadsheets, how many times have you done the formula in 2 different Excel spreadsheets, and you didn't quite get them the same, and you wonder why your answers are different? Well, if all your modeling, including calculations, are here, you're going to get a consistent view regardless of the UI tube. So let's take a look behind the scenes for a bit and look at the queries that came in. Let me do a refresh. So every query that comes in, regardless of what the client tool is to Adaptive Analytics, is logged here. And I can see which queries came in. So here's one that just came in a while ago. Let's take a look at this particular one here. Let's try this one. That's not the one I wanted. Let's try another one. Here we go. Here's one that came in querying for a particular date. Actually, this one a little while ago. So this is a select query that was sent from Tableau into IRIS Adaptive Analytics. This is the inbound query. It's querying the cube. What that translates to is an outbound query querying IRIS. And if I scroll down here, we'll see this is querying ultimately something called AS_AGG something. What is that? It decided for optimization reasons, instead of querying the raw table, I'm going to query one of these optimization structures that it built for me. The more queries you do, there's a machine learning engine inside IRIS Adaptive Analytics. It learns from what you do and creates these structures, which are just other tables, stores them in IRIS, and then when you get a particular query coming in, it decides whether or not it should use. So when it says AGG there, it's taking advantage of those aggregates. Let me look at this one. This one did not use aggregates, so here's a select. And if I look at the outbound query and go to my from clause, it's actually querying the view itself. So that one didn't need the aggregates. Aggregates are built automatically for you. As Jamie said, they didn't have to do anything on his customer. When Harris started using this, all these aggregates started to get created. And the default mode is let it do it for you. If you want to, there are actually customized ways to say you can force certain aggregates to be built, but there's lots of flexibility. And again, the machine learning engine inside IRIS Adaptive Analytics is what figures out what aggregates you need to solve the problem. Let's take a brief look at some of these aggregates. Here's one. This particular aggregate has been used 49 times. It returns about 16,000 rows. So we see information about it, what dimensions and measures are part of this aggregate, basically what columns are in the table. So there's a separate schema that has all the aggregates in it. And from an IRIS perspective, they're nothing but more than tables. here we see that it's been used 49 times, and it saved us a total of 29, almost 23 minutes. What does that mean? It kept track of the original query to the raw tables and how much time that took. It now knows how much time it takes to query the aggregate. And every time you run it, it adds to that total of, this is how much time you saved. If we didn't have the aggregate, it would have taken 23 more minutes to satisfy all these queries if it wasn't for the aggregate. So that's Tableau. Let's switch gears for a bit and look at Excel. Remember, you're going to get a consistent view of the data model regardless of which tool. So here we have the Excel way of showing you that exact same model. On the right here, we have our dimensions and measures. So let's pick, for example, let's put the state. I think we got the state here. Yeah, here we go. We'll put the state in our rows. And we will put, let's put product type, which we saw from the previous dashboard. Oops, scrolling the wrong way here. Product type, we're going to put that one in columns. And we'll get a measure that we're going to measure. Let's see, we'll measure the, scroll up here. Let's measure the trade quantity. And there we get by state, by type, whether we corporate, equity, or sovereign. And again, the same. By the way, let's go back and take a look at that query. We go to queries, we refresh. Here, I'm filtering only by the queries that come from me. So we do a refresh. Here we see a query that just came in that use aggregates, also some caching as well. And we see that particular query that came in. By the way, this query happens to be an MDX query because Excel talks MDX. That got sent to Adaptive Analytics. Adaptive Analytics turned that into the appropriate SQL query, and in this case, against one of the aggregate tables. So that's a little bit of what happens behind the scenes with IRIS Adaptive Analytics. We've seen a healthcare use case. This case is a financial case. If you want more specifics on Business 360, again, there's a session tomorrow afternoon. And I'll turn it back over to Carmen.
Yeah, and I guess actually let me ask a question for you too,
Sure.
Joe. I think because one of the key advantages for this customer was really providing a common language across the organization. Were there other things, or was that the primary?
That's pretty basic.
Yeah.
Jamie mentioned switching. This customer needs both Tableau and Excel and PowerBI. And the great part about that is you don't have to go to a particular user and say, sorry, you need to use our tool. It's like, use the tool you want. That's the pure benefit of self-service. The other aspect of this is really important is there's certain regulatory reports that have to be produced. And prior to using this, there's a lot of manual effort to create these things. Through not so much the analysis part, but the part before what I showed you, the entire Business 360, a lot of that process can be automated such that a process you would do once a month and it takes so long to do can now be done on a daily basis because it's all automated. You can get more current information more frequently than just the end of the month.
Yeah, and that's a great advantage. I mean, if you think about being able to kind of watch where you're going as it's going, rather than looking in the rearview mirror and trying to adjust at that point. The other thing I wanted to call out here too, and I think when Joe was showing us some of those models, those are virtual models. So I think that's something that's actually key to point out here too, and was an important factor I think in our partnership with AtScale, was that all of the source data stays in IRIS, or IRIS for Health. And all of the aggregated data is also there. What's happening in that modeling user interface is it's virtually modeling that. So it's actually not doing any rebuilding over on the IRIS side. So I think that's just another key aspect of this solution that I think is critical.
That's a key point, as Carmen mentioned, because we also have IRIS BI, which is a different use case, which is for more live data. And in there, when you define a cube, the first thing you have to do is build the cube. There's no building of the cube involved with IRIS Adaptive Analytics. So if you create a model, and you can start querying it right away, and the early queries will have to query the main data. As Jamie mentioned, that's why indices are important. But as you do more and more, these aggregates will get created, and as you do more queries, and it's not just an aggregate will be created to satisfy the query that I did. Something I do could create an aggregate that will help not only my query, but other queries that other people do.
Yeah, so that's great. All right, do you want to switch back to the
Yep.
slides there? Yeah, and I'm just going to do a little bit of wrap up, and then we will have some time for questions for any of us about the use cases as well. So start thinking about anything else that you want to ask. And I think in your slides, when you get the copy, because this was a live demo, let's give Joe a hand for that live demo. It takes a special
Those
kind
are
of
actually
guts.
screenshots. No,
These are screenshots here, yeah.
Just kidding.
So yeah,
But these are the screenshots in case the demo didn't work.
right. In the slides though, you'll have the screenshots so that you can refer to them. So yeah, so we're gonna go through those. So just a couple of references that I wanted to make here. One, the second one there is the session that Joe mentioned about doing the introducing the managed solution for asset management. So that's the one that he referred to. There are a couple of other sessions that are related to find out more about adaptive analytics. So you can attend either introducing smart data services tomorrow as well, or Data Fabric Demystified. That should be a good one too. In the Partner Pavilion, you can visit AtScale. I see them in the back row there. You guys can wave. So they will be in the Partner Pavilion as well, so you can visit their booth. There's also opportunities to schedule one-on-one meetings if you want to know more about adaptive analytics or really any topic. And then in the Tech Exchange, you can, and actually I should mention, I didn't put on here, but Demos and Drinks tonight is another great opportunity. AtScale is going to be there, as well as I think Business 360, right? Is going to be in there? No? Mike, do you know? Okay. There's going to be lots of people there doing demos, so just come and see it. It's going to be great. And then a couple of links, which will be in the slides here. Hopefully, if you're a customer, you know how to get a hold of us, so please feel free to do that. And then we have, there's a learning services learning path, which actually includes the ability to actually get hands-on without installing anything. We have a hosted system that you can use for that learning path with adaptive analytics. So you can get in there and see how you create your first model. And then obviously we have documentation with our own documentation, as well as links into the AtScale documentation for our customers as well. So all of that is available for more information about this. So hopefully we piqued your interest a little bit in this, and you know, the goal would be for you to go find out more, see if this is a use case that would fit in your situation, see if this is a solution that you want to explore further. And we have, I think, about 10 minutes left where we could do some Q&A if there are questions. And I'll just repeat questions because I don't think we have the handheld mic this time. We have too many speakers. So does anybody have a question?
Somebody.
It was such a good demo. Yeah.
It was, but let's talk about like one or two things that weren't mentioned a little bit.
That were touched on, so that you might be thinking about, even though you haven't thought about how to form this question. So obviously these aggregates get built when we run the query against them. First question you might be sitting and going, well, okay, the aggregate built. Well, what about later? Okay, what happens down the line? I mean, the aggregate has the data from that when that query was originally run. What about tomorrow or the next day when we actually add more data? How about a week later? Okay, in the particular use case I'm dealing with, the data updates every week. Okay, will that now reflect that new data? So there's two settings in adaptive analytics. One of them is dealing with incremental aggregates. So as you add new data to the system, it automatically will add to that aggregate. Okay, once again, I stress this isn't for live data, and the reason I mention that question is that incremental update is specifically for if you have new rows added to a table, not if you've gone back and changed data in older rows. Okay, very important. Okay, second, there is the ability, of course, to rebuild those aggregates completely, which of course makes sense, and that would be in the circumstance where you expected some rows to change. Okay, the data to be updated and stuff like that. You can schedule that. Okay, once again, since mine happens to be updating every week, we schedule it once a week. Okay, rebuild the data completely. Okay, and I have two models, I had stressed that before, that are meshed together. In this particular circumstance, the infusion pumps, that data comes 24 hours, but they never go back and change that. Okay, that never gets an update later going, oh, wait a minute, no, we didn't really give that medicine to that person. Okay, we were wrong. Okay, that never happens, luckily. Okay, so the incremental build works great for adding that data on top as it goes, but then once a week, major aggregate rebuild, and then the data's back up to date for what we have for them to then query. Okay, so and that's all automated. You just set that and do it. There's also sensitivity for when aggregates get built. Joe showed you the fact that the aggregates got built off of a query, but he spotted one that did not use aggregates, as I recall. Okay, that's a threshold setting. Okay, that sits there and says, if I'm saving you enough time, because obviously if I'm saving you 0.1/100th of a second, who cares? Why would we build an aggregate? It's effectively giving you the same results. Okay, on the other hand, if I'm saving you 5 minutes or whatever your company believes is enough time for you to sit there, you can set that setting and say, no, this is important, let's do it, this saves me enough time, build that aggregate, and use that aggregate. Okay, so, and the other piece that Carmen stressed about the virtual semantic layer matters dealing with storage. Okay, the adaptive analytics server does not need a lot of room. Okay, it doesn't need a lot of disk space itself. IRIS Adaptive Analytics, IRIS Advanced Server, where all of the data exists. Okay, that's probably going to need some space. Okay, hopefully. Hopefully you're against big data anyways. But adaptive analytics itself does not require big. It can require. I had said the one we're using was 4 cores, double threaded to 8, 32 gigs of RAM, because it's doing most of its work in memory and stuff like that.
And as Carmen mentioned, the aggregates themselves are not stored in that schema. They're also stored.
Yep.
And actually, you can configure what schema they will be, because chances are you want them to be stored in a separate, iris.dat than your main data is.
Yes. So with those other little pieces of information, any other questions? Any other thoughts?
You talk about security first. I kind of missed that thing, but like you don't share views among different users.
Actually, so the views down at the iris level.
Jamie, repeat the question for the audience.
Do you want to
Oh,
repeat the question?
I'm sorry, I apologize.
You got
So you said security at a model level, like only certain can see what.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit about the security level. So the question was, dealing with the security model, dealing with access to data, and whether or not the views were shared across was sort of a statement. But any of the tables down at the iris level aren't really touched. Okay, and we keep stressing that. When you log into adaptive analytics, okay, you still have an authenticated user there. Okay, and you don't have to. You could give them access to everything. You don't have to set up this query originally that I'm about to talk about, but you can establish a query that effectively is a where clause that automatically says, no, I only want to see the data that belongs to this person that gets run on every single query that they ever run. Okay, and so there's no way they can see past that. Okay, because they don't get to touch it in any way. In fact, one of the things we need to stress time and time again, the BI tool users don't get to touch the semantic layer, the definition, the model at all. Remember that. They never get to go down to that level. Okay? Mm-hmm. They only get to use their BI tool against the semantic layer that was already provided to them. Okay? So as soon as they come in and they authenticate, the where clause runs automatically and they can only see the data that's allowed to have access. And that's how that works.
Yeah. And in addition to the IRIS security model, there's a security model that's part of the adaptive analytics environment, as well as am I only a user that can run queries? Am I a user that can look at a model but maybe not edit it? Am I a user who can edit a model? And typically that authorization is done by using some external directory service like Active Directory or something else. So typically you want to tie that into whatever authentication you're already using.
Yep. Any other questions?
All right.
If not,
Yeah.
thank you for your time today.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
Thanks very much.